No one anticipated the morning would begin with a scream, especially not in Greenfield Park. In this quiet neighborhood, the loudest sounds on a Sunday were typically a distant lawnmower or the echo of a child's soccer game. But everything shifted when Officer Rachel Monroe's canine partner, Titan, halted suddenly beside a rusted storm drain and let out a deep, primal growl that there was something different in the air. Not just instinct, it felt like a warning. And it would lead to the uncovering of something far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Officer Monroe had walked this section of Greenfield Park countless times. The path was usually filled with relaxed joggers, older couples walking tiny dogs in sweaters, and the kind of routine calm you barely noticed. But today, Titan was uneasy. Not in his usual distracted by-squirrels way, but something more anxious, unsettled. It was as if he sensed danger but couldn't explain it. She tightened her grip on the leash as Titan abruptly pulled away from the main path, dragging her toward a row of storm drains hidden behind the tennis courts. "Titan, heel," she called, but he didn't respond. Instead, he barked once, short and urgent, then began circling a metal grate. Rusted and worn, his nose pressed against the cold ground. Rachel knelt beside him, peering closer. That's when she spotted it. Something blue wedged beneath the grate, barely visible. It looked like fabric shoved forcefully into the opening, as though someone had tried to hide it. She radioed in. "Monroe K9 Unit. Possible evidence located near drainage." Requesting backup and forensic support, with effort, she reached in and tugged the object free. It was a child's backpack, small blue, once decorated with cartoon stickers, now faded by time and weather. The zipper was busted, and one of the straps had been cleanly cut. She unzipped it slowly. Inside were a crumpled sweatshirt, a cracked plastic toy, and a scent not decay, but something recent. Human, faint, young. Titan pressed his nose closer, sniffing intently, then pawed at the edge of the grate before looking up at Rachel, as if to say, "We're not finished yet." The forensic team arrived and secured the backpack within the hour. Rachel stayed with Titan, watching as his body tensed. His focus locked on the tree line just beyond the park fence. "Something's off," she murmured. "You feel it too, don't you?" Titan barked once, sharply, and turned to face east away from the city. Toward the outskirts, stretches of open land, forgotten construction sites, derelict barns, and half-built condos that no one ever moved into. Rachel hesitated. She'd seen Titan follow trails to narcotics, suspects, even missing persons. But this wasn't coming from dispatch. This was something deeper, something unspoken between them. Still, protocol mattered. She reported in continuing with K9. "A long trail. Please advise if any recent missing child reports under age 10, but the response never came. No reports, no alerts, no missing backpack, nothing." She let Titan lead the way through a muddy lot, past tangled bushes, across a shallow stream, and finally to a gap in a damaged fence. Just beyond it, near a cluster of trees, they found something else, a single sock, pale pink, damp with morning dew, a faded unicorn printed on the side. Rachel slipped on a glove, picked it up, and sealed it into an evidence bag. Titan growled. Again quiet, low, concentrated, like he sensed something hiding in plain sight. By the afternoon, both the backpack and sock were en route to the lab. Rachel sat in her patrol car, scrolling through old case files on her computer, hoping for a match, some clue, anything that might connect. Still, nothing. No recent disappearances. No open investigations. Yet Titan remained uneasy. He paced the fence line, whining, occasionally barking at the woods, like they were whispering something only he could hear. Rachel finally stepped out of the cruiser. "Okay, boy," she said quietly. "Let's go see what's waiting in there." They moved forward through terrain that hadn't belonged to anyone in years. Maybe it had once. A place where kids dared each other to explore. Old, broken-down treehouses, burned-out shacks, overgrown paths swallowed by ivy. Silence that had settled over the years like dust. Titan slowed near what looked like a dry ditch, nearly invisible. Among the dead brush, Rachel almost passed it by and, till she noticed a rusted chain beneath a rotten plank. A makeshift cover, hiding something underneath. And just like that, the story deepened. She pulled the wooden cover aside. Beneath it lay a concrete tunnel entrance, one that wasn't listed on any city plans. The stench hit her immediately. Sweat, oil, and something sharper, metallic, like copper or blood. Titan whimpered, then let out a bark that rang with urgency and fear. Rachel instinctively stepped back, her pulse racing. Her gut now echoed the warnings Titan had been giving all morning. This wasn't just about a backpack anymore. She grabbed her radio. Monroe reporting from Sector 34, north side of Greenfield. I need immediate backup. Possible off-grid site. May involve unlawful detainment. Her hand hovered near her holstered weapon. The silence surrounding them felt too heavy, too deliberate. Titan, normally fearless and focused, stood stiffly, tail tucked. Easy, buddy, she murmured. We'll wait here. But even as she spoke, Rachel knew they had already stepped beyond the point of no return. This wasn't just a search anymore, it was the beginning of something hidden. Something someone had gone to great lengths to conceal. As twilight bled across the sky and backup units approached, Rachel remained alert, eyes scanning the tree line, the tunnel, and Titan's rigid posture. For the first time in years, she felt they weren't alone out there. Not anymore. The sun dipped low behind the trees as 2 patrol vehicles arrived, bringing 4 officers equipped with flashlights and body cameras. Sergeant Miles approached, eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Rachel stood at the tunnel's edge, one hand steady on Titan's collar. What exactly are we dealing with? He asked, peering into the narrow concrete shaft. She pointed. Drainage. Tunnel, not up to code. Covered with rotting wood and a length of chain, someone didn't want it discovered. You sure it's not just runoff? Rachel shook her head. Titan tracked the scent from the park straight to here. That backpack. The sock, they weren't old. He's still locked in on the trail. Titan barked once, low and deliberate, then stepped forward. Growling deep in his chest, Miles exhaled and adjusted his vest. All right, Monroe, you and Titan take the lead. Move slow, and watch for anything off. As soon as they ducked into the tunnel, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't just cooler, it was heavier, still, like the air hadn't moved in years. Their boots splashed through shallow, stagnant water. Flashlight beams swept across crumbling graffiti, rust stains, and cobwebs so thick they sagged with dust. The tunnel was tight, maybe 5 feet wide, 7 feet tall. Land stretched forward in a straight, claustrophobic line. Titan's breathing shifted. No longer afraid now, he was focused. Ready. About 300 feet in, he stopped cold. Rachel's light landed on a stack of milk crates, blocking a narrow side opening. It wasn't part of the original structure. Someone had fashioned a makeshift door out of plywood and plastic sheeting. Miles nodded. Let's take a look. An officer stepped up and pried the panel away with a crowbar. Inside was a cramped concrete chamber. No windows. Just for bare walls, a child-sized plastic chair, an old blanket on the ground, and a half-empty water bottle. Rachel's stomach turned. She stepped in, shining her light along the walls. Scratches, tally marks, some shallow, others deep, by fingernails. No one builds this to store tools, she said softly. Titan pawed at a corner where a tile was loose. Rachel crouched, pulled it free, and uncovered a small stash. Empty food wrappers, a cracked tablet, and a worn teddy bear, missing an eye. Someone had been living here recently. Outside the small room, Sergeant Miles called it in. We've located a potential holding area. Unknown how long it's been in use. Request CSU and missing persons on site immediately. Rachel stayed behind, crouching next to Titan, who remained restless. His nose traced the walls, his body tense. He glanced at her, then back toward the far end of the tunnel. The trail wasn't cold yet. They pressed on. 10 more minutes down the narrow corridor brought them to another fork, this time leading to an old maintenance ladder. The rungs were rusted, but still intact, leading up toward a manhole cover that rattled slightly in the breeze. Rachel looked Over at Miles, requesting permission to follow Titan up. He hesitated for a moment. "Take Officer Rayner with you," she nodded. With Titan leading, she climbed the ladder, her heart pounding with each step. The manhole gave with a metallic groan. Rachel emerged into tall grass behind a dilapidated fence line. Ahead stood an old two-story house, weathered, partly boarded, forgotten. The kind of place neighborhood kids dared each other to approach. Titan caught a scent and bolted toward the back of the house. Rachel and Rayner followed, weapons drawn but lowered. Titan stopped at a rusted basement door beneath a crumbling deck. He barked sharply 3 times and began clawing furiously at the wood. "Movement," Rayner whispered. Curtains just shifted. Rachel lifted her radio. "Monroe reporting. Possible holding location confirmed. Suspect activity observed." A request for full perimeter security and aerial thermal drones went out immediately. The house wasn't tied to any registered owner. Rachel had already checked the records. And Titan was trembling. Not from fear, but from fury. They held position as the tactical unit arrived. No need for flashbangs. The basement door gave way with a single forceful strike. Rachel and Titan were the first through. What waited below made her skin crawl. The space had been converted for survival, but for containment. The basement had been divided into 4 separate enclosures, each one sealed with a metal gate. No beds, no comforts. 2 of them had chains, long and dragging on the concrete. At the center stood a mounted camera. Still recording, wires snaking through the wall into a battery pack. Titan snarled and lunged at it, sending it clattering to the floor. Rachel picked it up. It was warm to the touch. Someone had just been here. A creak echoed from above. Rachel spun and bolted up the stairs. Just as she reached the top, she caught a side door swinging shut. "Suspect on foot," she yelled. Officers scattered into formation. Titan surged ahead, barking with purpose, weaving through the backyard and around old trash bins. Rachel sprinted after him, lungs burning, vision locked forward. A thud cracked through the air. Shout. She rounded the corner to find Titan atop a mat, middle-aged, unshaven, bleeding from the arm where Titan held his grip. "I didn't touch anyone," the man screamed. "It wasn't me. Just keep an eye on it." Rachel cuffed him, without a word, catching her breath. "Then who are you watching it for?" The man only laughed. Inside the bunker, forensics swept the room. Rachel found a folder wedged under the basement stairs, soaked from moisture but mostly intact. She opened it carefully. Inside were photos, grainy surveillance prints of children, parks, patrol routes, and then herself, walking Titan on the lake trail. 2 weeks ago, her chest tightened. Near the bottom of the folder was a sticky note, yellowed and smudged. "Monroe, not yet." Someone had been following her. Tracking her. Planning. By 1 a.m., the entire scene had been secured. The man identified as Daryl Finch, an unregistered squatter, refused to name anyone else. All he admitted was that his role was to keep it clean for when it was needed again. Who they were, he wouldn't say. But Rachel no longer needed more answers. Titan hadn't lost the scent. Back at the cruiser, the weight of the night settled in. Rachel sat silently, the basement layout spread across her lap. "Someone built this," she said quietly, "to make kids vanish. Right here, on American soil." Titan rested his head on her lap, still tense but calm, eyes never closing. "Not until you found that backpack," she added, glancing toward the tree line beyond the fence. They were just scratching the surface. Somewhere out there, the ones behind all of this were still watching, still waiting. And Titan, he was already on their trail again. What they found wasn't a safe house. It wasn't a hideout. It was a waypoint, a temporary stop. A place where people stayed just long enough to disappear, and it had been buried just beyond Greenfield Park, 1 manhole away from morning joggers and kids on bikes. By sunrise, the house was cordoned off. Detectives moved in, snapping photos, cataloging evidence, trying to make sense of the operation they had unearthed. But for Rachel, the truth had already sunk in. This wasn't over. Not even close. But for Officer Rachel Monroe, things still didn't sit right. It wasn't over, not yet. Someone had been watching her, following her routes, snapping pictures of her, and Titan from the shadows. She hadn't voiced it, not even to herself, but deep down, she knew this was personal. Titan was the one who gave the next lead. The night after the raid, while Rachel was going through files in her garage, the dog was uneasy pacing by the door, ears flicking every time a vehicle passed outside. When she opened the door, Titan bolted to the patrol car and sat, waiting by the passenger side. "You want to go now?" she asked. "Where to?" Titan gave a single bark and stared off toward the east. Rachel hesitated. There were no new orders to resume the search, but she trusted that dog more than most people in uniform. "Okay," she murmured. "Show me." They drove past the freeway, through construction zones, and past the truck stop where long-haul drivers pulled in for the night. Titan stayed quiet until they passed an old, boarded-up diner, and then he growled a low, steady sound. He was staring down a dirt path that veered off behind the building. The diner's sign was too faded to read, and its windows were sealed with plywood, but just beyond it, a gravel lane twisted into a line of trees, ending at a small house narrow, almost swallowed by overgrown brush and vines. Rachel's brows drew together. This place wasn't on any of the property records she had reviewed. She'd checked every parcel linked to the previous location. This house didn't exist on paper. She pulled over, secured her vest, and grabbed the radio. Unit 42. Found unlisted building off Old Mill Road. Investigating with K9. No immediate activity. Hand resting near her weapon, she moved cautiously. Titan crept forward, tail stiff, muscles tight as he approached the porch. The wooden boards creaked under Rachel's boots. No lights, no movement. She peered through a broken slat in the window. Inside, she saw old newspapers, dusty boxes, and rows of filing cabinets pressed against the back wall. "Storage," she muttered, but Titan barked sharply and veered around the side, toward a cellar door locked. Again Rachel's breath caught. This felt familiar, but the air here was different, thicker, colder, and damp, like the place had been sealed for a long time. She called for backup but didn't wait. One kick broke the lock. Titan darted down the steps into the dark. Rachel followed, flashlight cutting through the pitch. The smell hit her first. Mold, chemicals, sweat, and something metallic and sterile, like an old freezer. Unlike the first location, this basement wasn't divided by cages. It was a single, open room, tiled, spotless, too spotless. A white table sat in the center with a drain beneath and metal hooks overhead. Titan let out a low growl, his fur bristling. Rachel's flashlight swung to the wall, photos, dozens of them, tacked in layers. Some were surveillance footage, others taken from the street. Children and teens, some with faces blurred, others marked with red circles. One photo showed a blue backpack, another, a single sock. Then one of a little girl, brown hair, wide-eyed, standing in front of a school bus. Rachel's stomach tightened. That facey, she recognized it. It was a missing child flyer she'd seen last fall at a gas station in a neighboring county. Mara Tinsley, 8 years old, disappeared after school. No evidence, no suspects, until now. She stepped toward a cabinet, opened the top drawer. Inside were files, each labeled and meticulously sorted. Names, photos, physical traits, notes on allergies, routines, and fears. This wasn't random, it was structured. Systematic. Titan nudged open a bottom drawer and barked. Inside were hand-drawn maps marked with pins and red threads, routes through parks, forgotten service roads, drainage tunnels. Rachel's heart thudded in her chest. These weren't just crime scenes, they were stalking grounds. She radioed in, voice steady but urgent. Confirmed second location. Signs of organized abduction system. Request full forensic and child protection response team, now? Then, just as she finished speaking, it happened. A click, the unmistakable snap of a camera shutter. Rachel spun around, flashlight beams slashing the dark, but the room was empty. She checked the door. It was still ajar. Titan stood rigid, eyes fixed on the far end of the basement, a low growl rumbling in his throat. That's when they noticed it. A trapdoor hidden beneath an old rug. Rachel motioned for Titan to hold position. She lifted the rug and opened the door, revealing a ladder descending into a tunnel. Unlike the one they'd found in the park, this passage was newer, reinforced, solid, and ominous. Stretching deep into darkness like a buried artery. Without hesitation, Rachel began her descent, weapon drawn, flashlight cutting through the gloom. At the bottom, she entered a small chamber. A power supply buzzed in one corner, alongside a backup generator. On a table, a monitor displayed for camera feeds. One showed the very basement she had just exited. Another revealed a room furnished with toys, a worn mattress, and sleeping quietly in the corner a child, Mara. Rachel breathed. Titan barked sharply from above. Rachel grabbed her radio. We have a child visible on live feed. Unknown location. Confirm movement between properties. Request immediate trace and facial match on all camera inputs. By the time the team arrived, the building had already been emptied. But the tunnel branched out. One path led to a utility shed nearly a quarter-mile away. Inside, fresh footprints and tire marks told the rest of the story someone had left. Just moments before Rachel's arrival, they had seen her, heard her, possibly taken her picture again. That night, Rachel sat on the edge of the task force van, head bowed, hands covering her face. Titan pressed gently against her arm, then placed his head in her lap. You didn't stop, she murmured, stroking his fur. If it weren't for you, they'd still be down there. All of them. Titan looked up at her with calm, unwavering eyes. His work wasn't done. Neither was hers. The next day, forensic labs confirmed what Rachel already knew. The girl on the camera feed matched the missing poster of Mara Tinsley, years old, last seen outside her school the previous autumn. A trace on the feed led them to a farmhouse 70 miles west. When they got there, the girl was already gone, but her hairbrush was still warm, and her folded sweater lay untouched on the bed. They were always one step behind. But Titan was already picking up the trail again. Someone had made a mistake, underestimating a German shepherd with an instinct for the lost, and a handler who refused to quit. The old farmhouse stood isolated on a gravel ridge in Renshaw County, surrounded by rusted wire fencing and fields of corn, long forgotten, the kind of place built to disappear on purpose. By the time Rachel and Titan arrived with the joint task force, an unsettling stillness clung to the air. The night sky stretched overhead, quiet and distant, like even the stars were holding their breath. They didn't knock. The front door gave way with a single kick. Inside, the house felt frozen in time. Dust swirled in the flashlight beams. Plastic-covered furniture lined the walls, untouched, like echoes of lives no longer lived. A calendar from 1997 still clung to the kitchen wall. But they weren't here. For what was on the surface, Titan moved instantly, straight toward the basement. The door was padlocked. His growl was sharp, decisive. Rachel glanced at Sergeant Miles, who had joined the raid. Same lock as the last two, she said. He gave a grim nod. They're coordinated. The bolt cutters snapped the lock cleanly. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow stairwell descending into cold, stale air. This basement was different, far worse than the others. The walls were lined with professional-grade soundproofing foam. Corners reinforced with steel. Heavy insulation sealed every gap. This wasn't improvised. It was deliberately constructed. The floor had been scrubbed clean. No hair, no dust, no DNA, nothing except one detail. Titan barked and moved toward a wall panel. Rachel followed, pulse racing. She tapped the panel. It shifted. A hidden compartment inside were 3 items: a manila folder marked internal use only, a disposable phone, and a photograph. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the image from the folder. It showed her and Titan walking patrol near Greenfield Lake. The photo was dated 3 months earlier. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "Handler is being watched." Intervene only if she deviates. The room seemed to shrink. Around her, Miles stepped up behind her, peering over her shoulder at the image and the phone. You think they're watching officers? Rachel shook her head slowly. Not all officers, just me. Later that night, she sat inside the van, folder open on her lap. The contents included more surveillance images from police databases, private emails, internal memos, stamped confidential. Some of the missing child reports hadn't even been published yet. These files weren't supposed to exist. Outside law enforcement, that could only mean one thing: someone on the inside was feeding them information. A chill crept over her skin. Every operation that had come up short, every child relocated just hours before arrival, it wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Someone knew exactly when they were coming. Titan sat by her feet, completely still. His eyes tracked her movements. Waiting, focused, he could sense it to dot betrayal. The next morning, Rachel met privately with Captain Leland, the one who had brought her into the K9 unit, and now she needed to know if he was the one who had opened the door to something much darker. He was the one who had taught her to trust Titan above all else. The last person she ever wanted to suspect, but she needed answers. I need access to the internal activity logs, Rachel said, placing the photo gently on his desk. Someone inside is monitoring our case's tracking updates, watching patrol patterns, leaking information. Captain Leland studied the photo, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back slowly in his chair. You think this ties back to the task force? I don't know what to think yet, she replied. But Titan's been finding these places. By pure instinct, he's trailing something we've never documented. Leland tapped a finger on the folder. If you're going to light this match, you better be damn sure it's not just smoke you're chasing. Rachel didn't look away. This isn't smoke. It's a structure, and it knows exactly how we operate. Later that day, the crime scene unit got back to her. They'd pulled data from the disposable phone. Only one message had been left behind and finished, tucked away in the drafts folder. It read, "If you don't silence the dog, they'll come for you too." She stared at the words, then at Titan, who was resting quietly beside the cruiser. She didn't say a word, but the realization landed hard. They weren't just after children. Any more, Titan was a liability, and so was she. That night, Rachel changed everything. She drove backroads instead of highways. She stopped parking in the open and switched off her phone unless absolutely necessary. Her eyes lingered longer on coworkers. Even the smallest things began to feel wrong: the missing patrol logs, emails she never wrote that showed up in her sent folder, a detective who kept asking oddly specific questions about Titan's capabilities. Then came the tip. A deputy from Harland County called in for assistance. He suspected a group of squatters, possibly teens. Maybe a drug house operating out of an abandoned church, just off a quiet service road near the state line. Rachel almost dismissed it until Titan heard the 911 recording. The second the playback hit the speaker, he erupted, barking, whining, spinning in place like he knew exactly what it was. Rachel didn't hesitate. She grabbed her gear and they headed north. The church was crumbling, long abandoned. The stained glass was shattered. Pews lay broken, tossed aside. Mold clung to the altar walls like decay had taken root in the foundation. But the basement was sealed. Near the old baptismal font, Titan became frantic. He clawed at the stone floor, barked non-stop, nose pressed to the tile. Rachel knelt down, feeling along the edge. Something was loose. She and Sergeant Miles pried up the tile and found a hidden hatch made of metal, coated in dust and scorched earth. It opened into a bunker, and this time it wasn't empty. 3 children, none older than 10. One unconscious, one sobbing. The third sitting silently in a corner, eyes wide, completely still. Rachel's hands trembled as she lifted them out one by one, whispering reassurances, "You're safe, now. Help is coming." Titan gently licked the unconscious boy's cheek, then laid beside the little girl, his body curled around her protectively, until medics arrived by morning. The story had gone national. Hero K9 rescues children from hidden bunker beneath abandoned church. Titan was hailed as a miracle, a savior, an overnight sensation. But Rachel knew better. This wasn't a victory, it was a signal. They were raising the stakes. They were leaving breadcrumbs, now not just trails, but messages. In one corner of the bunker, scrawled in chalk across a crumbling brick wall, were 3 words. Still watching you. Later, as she reviewed the church's security footage, a chill ran through her. 12 hours before they'd arrived, someone had entered the building. A single figure, hooded, moving deliberately, in and out. Gone just 10 minutes before their arrival. And then, in a grainy frame, Rachel stopped cold. She recognized the posture. The build. The way the man walked. He wasn't a stranger. He was someone she'd seen every week. Someone from her own department. That night, sleep didn't come. Titan curled beside her, ever watchful, still as stone. Rachel sat on her porch. Service weapon across her lap, eyes scanning the darkness. The deeper she looked, the more the truth revealed itself. This had been going on far longer than anyone had known. Hiding in plain sight, evading detection, and every time, it had taken Titan just tightened to notice the pattern. She didn't know how far this reached, or how many more children were out there waiting, but she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't stop, neither would he. The morning after the operation at the abandoned church, Rachel Monroe drove silently to the precinct. Titan was curled up in the back of her cruiser. The news had already turned the story into a feel-good headline. K9 hero rescues children from trafficking ring. But Rachel couldn't bring herself to smile. Behind the cheers and headlines was a network still active, a system that always seemed a step ahead until Titan caught its scent. Now, the ones who hunted had become the hunted. Still, Rachel knew something else this time. They were watching her more closely than ever. The precinct felt different that morning. Too quiet, too many glances. Detective Colin Price, tall and lean, always perfectly dressed, met her in the hallway with a smile that didn't quite meet his eyes. Big win yesterday. You should be proud. Rachel didn't return the smile. 3 kids were saved, but 2 others had been lost before that. Still, Colin continued. It's more progress than we've made all year. He gave her shoulder a pat and walked off, the scent of high-end cologne lingering in his wake, along with an unspoken tension. Titan let out a soft growl. You felt that too, didn't you? Rachel whispered, leaning toward him. At her desk. Her eyes immediately locked onto the manila envelope she'd hidden behind the bottom drawer. She had made copies of everything from the farmhouse and underground bunker photos, names, building schematics. None of it was on the department's server. She didn't trust the system, not when someone might still be feeding information to the other side. Instead, she used an encrypted thumb drive, kept entirely offline. She plugged it in. That's when she saw something new, a file labeled map_series_final. She hadn't added it. The timestamp said it had been modified just 3 hours earlier. Her breath caught. Opening it carefully, she found a satellite composite covering 5 counties. Dotted with more than a dozen red X's. Some were deep in wooded areas, others along defunct rail lines, and one was near an old, abandoned summer camp. Each was marked with dates, names, and ages. She kept scrolling and found a folder labeled potential_transfers. 10 names, all children. Each marked as inactive in the national system, previously untraceable. Until now, Rachel sat back in her chair, realization sinking in. This wasn't just a string of secret bunkers. It was a mapped route, an entire trafficking highway camouflaged beneath farmland and forgotten buildings. Whoever had added the file wanted her to find it. That meant this wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. She didn't go to the captain, not yet. Instead, she called Miles. He arrived 20 minutes later, holding 2 coffees and a face full of questions. I haven't stopped thinking about it, he said. That guy at the farmhouse, the cameras, none of that was just for storage. That was a distribution center. Rachel nodded and pulled up the map. Take a look at this. Miles examined the screen, his jaw tightening. Jesus. This many sites across 5 counties. How the hell has this gone unnoticed? Rachel clicked one of the red markers. It expanded to reveal coordinates, a rough blueprint of a structure. Even notes on internal guard rotations. Miles froze. Where? Did you get this? I didn't, she said. Someone planted it on my drive last night. You think it's a leak? I think it's bait. They picked one of the sites listed further down the Documenta warehouse near Carver Ridge. It was listed as unoccupied, no power, and no official records of ownership. Rachel didn't wait for authorization. She loaded up Titan, shared the location with Miles, and took back roads to avoid attention. The warehouse looked like nothing special: sheet metal walls, caved-in roof, rusting delivery trucks out front. But Titan didn't hesitate. He jumped out of the cruiser and headed straight for a side door, scratching at it with urgency. Rachel drew her firearm and went in. The place smelled sharply of ammonia. The lights were out, but sunlight filtered in through holes in the roof. Along the back wall were rows of cages, empty, except for one. A single dog crate sat at the end, the kind made for large breeds. Inside was a blanket and a plastic beaded bracelet with tiny letters. Rachel's stomach turned. Casey Winters, 6 years old, missing from Tennessee, gone for 3 months, no leads, until now. Titan barked sharply at the wall. Rachel moved closer and saw something etched into the concrete. A symbol circle with a line through it. The same one from a note at the farmhouse. She took photos. Carefully placed the bracelet in an evidence bag and radioed for backup. But it was already too late. The sound of tires crunching gravel hit her ears like an alarm. She ducked behind cover. Titan pressed himself low to the ground. 2 black SUVs rolled into the lot. No plates, tinted windows. 3 men stepped out. They were dressed like contractors, but their movements gave them a Wakes military, tactical, efficient. They weren't here to investigate. They were here to clean up Paw, to make sure she disappeared. Rachel whispered to Titan, "Stay, wait." She moved quietly around the back, watching as the men entered through the same side door. They went straight for the crate, collecting the blanket and bracelet, then spraying the walls with a fine mist. Bleach? Or something like it, Titan growled. A deep rumble in his throat. Rachel raised her phone and quietly recorded the scene. 20 seconds of silent video. She turned to leave, but one of the men stopped and pulled out a walkie-talkie. "No. Child here handler arrived early again. She's catching on. Then pass it up." The chain she's found the grid map. Rachel ducked behind a rusted truck, holding her breath. Titan remained perfectly still. After 3 tense minutes, the men exited the building, taking all traces of evidence with them, none aware that Rachel had already sent the footage to Miles that night. Back at home, her nerves were raw. Her heart hadn't slowed since she left the warehouse. Titan sat alert at her side on the porch. "They're afraid of you," she murmured. "You're the one thing they can't predict." She opened her laptop and began uploading everything: the satellite map, the photo of the bracelet, and the video of the SUV S2, a secure off-site server. This wasn't for the department, it was insurance. If something happened, the truth wouldn't be buried. That then came the knock at the front. But at the back door, Rachel moved cautiously, gun in hand, stepping toward the sliding glass door off the kitchen. A tall figure stood just outside, half hidden in shadow. She unlocked the door slowly. It was Miles. His face was pale, shaken. "They're deeper than we thought," he said. "I ran facial recognition on one of the guys from the warehouse." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "He's on the payroll. Internal affairs. Transferred here from Chicago about 6 months ago." Rachel's stomach turned. "They're not just infiltrating departments," she whispered. "They're embedding themselves in every layer of law enforcement." "Exactly," Miles said. "And they know you're getting close." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. "Found this under your rear bumper." Rachel stared at the tracker. Titan let out a low growl and positioned himself between them and the door. "They're not just watching anymore," she said. "They're preparing to make a move." Rachel didn't sleep that night. She paced her living room while Titan lay by the door. occasionally lifting his head, ears twitching as if sensing something beyond the walls. Her thoughts wouldn't stop. How far did this network reach? How long had they been monitoring her? And how close was she to shutting it all down? She pulled up the satellite map again, a tread marker, each entry labeled inactive. Each scrap of intel she'd uncovered over the last week. She began pinning it all to her wall, connecting pieces with tape and string like something out of a crime thriller. But suddenly, it all made sense. Every site followed a pattern. Every movement served a purpose, and they all converged on a single location, one she had missed until now. Greenfield Regional Airport. It was a mid-size facility, mostly used for cargo transport and private charter flights. That explained the minimal scrutiny. These kids weren't being trafficked through commercial terminals, they were being moved out in private hangars. Sedated, documented under fake identities, and labeled as cargo. It was a sophisticated operation, one that required help from the inside. The deeper Rachel dug, the more one name kept surfacing. Deputy Chief Arnold Keene. A veteran officer, highly decorated, widely respected. But 6 months ago, he'd quietly taken over as the liaison for airport security. Her hands trembled as she examined the access logs. Keene had clearance to every location they'd found, including the warehouse. One of the SUVs from that scene was registered to a shell company linked to his sister in Law. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. It was direct. Later that evening, Rachel and Miles sat in her garage, surrounded by files and screens. "We need to go straight to the feds," Miles said in a low voice. "Bypass the precinct entirely. Keene's got people in there." Rachel nodded. "I've already started uploading everything to the FBI field office. It'll hit their system by morning, but I'm not waiting." Miles looked at her, stern. She didn't blink. "He's using his badge to smuggle them out. If we wait another day, more kids vanish." Miles let out a breath. "Then, we do it right." Tonight, they moved without a word. Titan was loaded into the back seat, equipment packed. No sirens, no official calls. Just quiet determination. They arrived at the industrial section of Greenfield Airport just after midnight. The roads were empty, with only a few dim security lights casting long shadows over rows of hangars. As soon as they approached Hangar 6, Titan began barking, not frantically, but with sharp, deliberate urgency. It was his alert signal. He sensed someone inside. Rachel eased the cruiser into a dark corner and stepped out. Weapon drawn, Titan staying close to her side. Miles took position at the back, covering their exit. Rachel crept up to a side window and peered in. There were no aircraft in sight. Instead, the space was filled with large, secured metal crates. One of them had a sticker, "Live Cargo," handle. With care, her stomach turned. Titan let out a low primal growl. Rachel signaled to Miles quiet entry. The door groaned as it opened. She stepped inside, flashlight cutting across crates, supplies, and in the far corner, a small office with a light glowing through the window. Titan made a beeline for it, pawing the door with urgency. Rachel pressed her ear against it. She heard typing, papers being shuffled, and then a voice she recognized. "She's getting too close. Upload the data. If I go missing, trigger the contingency." Keene. Rachel kicked the door open, weapon raised. "Hands where I can see them." Deputy Chief Arnold Keene turned slowly in his chair, calm and composed, gently setting down his tablet. He didn't seem surprised. "I had a feeling it'd be you," he said, with a cold smile. Titan growled, unmoving. Rachel's grip stayed firm. "You've got 10 seconds to explain why children are being stored like freight under your authority." Keene shrugged. "Because it's profitable, and because no one asks questions if you point them the right way, including your dog." He gave Titan a dismissive glance. Rachel's jaw tightened. "Where are they now?" "You're too late," he said, smug. "They're already in the air." Rachel tapped her radio. "Miles, lock down the runway. Alert the FAA. No one takes off." Keene stood, laughing. "You think this ends with me? I'm just one piece. Take me out, and someone else fills the slot. You expose me, and the rest will vanish, and you'll be left with nothing but ghosts. Titan barked once loud, piercing, commanding. Keen took a step forward. Go ahead. Arrest me. Leak the story. But the second you do, all the files you've gathered, gone, the network goes dark. You'll be chasing shadows. Rachel didn't move. Then, she smiled. I'm not leaking the story. Keen froze. I already released. Its outside floodlights blazed to life. FBI agents flooded the hangar, sirens wailed, voices shouted commands. Keen turned toward the commotion in disbelief. Rachel lifted her phone. I knew they'd try to silence me. That's why I sent everything, your files, audio recordings, locations to multiple independent watchdogs. You're not just getting arrested, you're getting exposed. Keen lunged. Titan reacted, instantly springing forward, locking onto Keen's arm, and bringing him to the ground until agents swarmed in to take over. Rachel stood, breathing heavily. As Keen was led away in cuffs, the search of the hangar revealed 5 children, unconscious but alive, hidden in the crates. 2 had been missing for over a year. 1 matched the photo of the girl with the teddy bear, and 1 was Mara Tinsley. By the following day, the nation was watching. Headlines blazed. K9 Titan leads. Officer to National Child Trafficking bust. Corrupt deputy chief, among dozens arrested. Rachel Monroe and her partner expose hidden crisis. Rachel didn't speak to the media, but she visited every child who had been rescued. Titan came along too. He was no longer just a police K9, he had become a symbol. Later, in Greenfield Park, Rachel and Titan stood at the trail where everything had begun. The sewer grate was sealed. The trees were trimmed. Everything appeared normal again, but Rachel knew better. Titan looked up at her. She knelt down, wrapping her arms around his neck. You're more than a partner. You know that, right? He wagged his tail. And in the quiet wind, it felt like the voices that had once been lost in the system had finally been heard. Thank you for watching.